Absalom, the son of King David, is remembered for his shocking betrayal, turning against his own father and challenging the very kingdom of Israel. But what drove him to such drastic measures? In this video, we'll uncover the tragic and complex story of Absalom, exploring his rise to power, the broken relationship with his father, and the devastating consequences of his actions. Have you ever wondered how family struggles and unchecked ambition can lead to disaster? This video offers powerful lessons about loyalty, pride, and the dangerous consequences of disobedience. As you dive into Absalom's story, you'll gain insights that can help you navigate your own relationships and spiritual journey. Are you ready to learn from one of the Bible's most heartbreaking stories? Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps spread these important messages to others who need to hear them. Let's explore Absalom's story and its lessons for us today. As King David's reign continued, his son Absalom began to quietly build support for his own claim to the throne. Absalom, known for his charm and good looks, realized that the key to power was winning the hearts of the people. He positioned himself as a leader who understood the struggles of the common people. He stood at the city gate, offering justice to those who felt neglected by King David. By listening to the grievances of the people and promising to provide better leadership, Absalom quickly gained popularity. His actions made him a beloved figure among the Israelites, and many began to see him as a better alternative to his father, King David. Absalom's charisma and ability to relate to the people made him an effective leader, but his ambitions went beyond popularity. He began to openly challenge his father's authority. Absalom's ambition grew as he gathered more followers and eventually started planning his rebellion. His popularity and influence allowed him to declare himself king in Hebron, a strategic move that would set his rebellion into motion. This declaration marked the point where Absalom no longer wanted to simply serve as a popular leader. He sought to take the throne that rightfully belonged to his father. The declaration of rebellion was a direct challenge to King David's rule. Absalom's forces marched toward Jerusalem, and David, realizing the gravity of the situation, had no choice but to flee the city. This was a heartbreaking moment for David, as he was forced to abandon his capital city in order to protect himself and his loyal followers. Absalom's rebellion was not just an attempt to take power, it was a personal betrayal that threatened the unity and stability of the entire kingdom. His actions tore apart the kingdom that his father had worked so hard to build. The rebellion was not just about power, it was about a deep sense of betrayal. Absalom, as David's son, had been given a privileged position in the kingdom, but his desire for the throne led him to betray his father and his kingdom. The division caused by his rebellion resulted in a civil war, with Absalom's forces fighting against David's loyalists. The entire nation was affected by this conflict, which stemmed from Absalom's personal ambitions and his failure to consider the consequences of his actions. As the rebellion continued, Absalom's disregard for the loyalty he owed to his father became clear. His ambition blinded him to the deep love and respect he should have had for David, the man who had been both his father and the king. Absalom's plan to take the throne ultimately proved to be his undoing. His betrayal of his father, combined with his reckless ambition, led to a civil war that fractured the kingdom. Despite his popular support, Absalom's actions showed that he was not a man of integrity, but one driven by selfish desires. Absalom's coup and betrayal of his father serve as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and pride. His story shows how personal desires can lead to division, betrayal, and, ultimately, destruction. Absalom's rebellion was not just a political move, it was a tragic family betrayal that cost him everything. His desire for power led him down a path of conflict and ultimately death, leaving behind a kingdom divided and a legacy marked by betrayal. When Absalom rebelled and sought to take the throne, King David faced a heartbreaking decision. Despite the betrayal by his own son, David chose not to fight Absalom directly at first. Instead, he decided to flee Jerusalem, leaving the city behind to protect his people and avoid unnecessary bloodshed. This choice showed David's deep sorrow and reluctance to engage in battle with his own flesh and blood. David trusted that his loyal followers would fight to defend the kingdom, but he did not want to harm his son. It was a painful moment of humility and love for David, knowing the civil war would tear apart his family and kingdom. David's decision to leave Jerusalem was not just a strategic one, it was also a reflection of his heart. He knew that fighting against his son would only lead to greater division and devastation. By stepping back and allowing the battle to unfold, David made a difficult but selfless choice, putting the welfare of his people before his own personal grief. This decision showed David's wisdom and understanding of the consequences of a war fought between family members. His heart ached for what was happening, but he trusted God's plan and the loyalty of his men. As the civil war between David and Absalom's forces raged on, it became clear that this would be a decisive moment for Israel. David's loyalists, including his generals and soldiers, fought bravely to protect the king and his kingdom. Despite the overwhelming numbers on Absalom's side, David's army had the advantage of unity and experience. The conflict culminated in a decisive battle in the forest of Ephraim, where Absalom's forces were decisively defeated by David's loyal troops. This battle, though a victory for David's side, marked the beginning of the end for Absalom. Absalom, despite his earlier popularity, found himself losing the battle. As he fled the battlefield, he was caught by his long hair in the branches of a tree. Unable to free himself, Absalom was left hanging and vulnerable. This moment of capture was the culmination of his ambition, betrayal, and defiance. His life ended in a tragic and humiliating manner, illustrating the consequences of his rebellion against his father. The great leader who had once been hailed as a future king now found himself in the most vulnerable position of all. The news of Absalom's death devastated David, as he had hoped for a peaceful resolution rather than a violent confrontation. The king's grief was profound. He mourned his son deeply, despite the rebellion and the war. David's lament, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom! If only I had died instead of you," reflected the deep love he had for his son, even after all that had happened. His sorrow was not just for the loss of his son, but for the division that Absalom's actions had caused within the kingdom. In the end, the civil war left a deep scar on David and the kingdom of Israel. While David emerged victorious, the consequences of the conflict were far-reaching. Absalom's rebellion not only cost him his life but also led to a fractured and wounded kingdom. David's response to the rebellion, his decision to avoid fighting his son, and his profound sorrow over the death, remind us of the emotional and spiritual toll that conflicts within families and communities can have. The story of David and Absalom teaches us about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of loyalty and love in maintaining unity. Absalom's death marked the tragic end of his rebellion and ambition. During the battle between his forces and David's loyalists, Absalom fled the battlefield in an attempt to escape. However, his long, thick hair became entangled in the branches of a tree, leaving him helpless and vulnerable. Unable to free himself, Absalom was left hanging by his hair while his enemies approached. Joab, David's general, found Absalom in this vulnerable position and, against David's wishes, struck him down. This act of violence, while ending the rebellion, was a moment of deep sorrow and tragedy for David, who had hoped for a peaceful resolution. The news of Absalom's death devastated David, and his grief was overwhelming. Despite the rebellion and the pain Absalom had caused, David's love for his son never wavered. Upon hearing of Absalom's death, David mourned deeply, crying out, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom! If only I had died instead of you!" His words reflected the deep, heart-wrenching sorrow of a father who had lost his son, despite the conflict between them. David's reaction shows the depth of a father's love, even in the face of betrayal and rebellion. Absalom's tragic end also marked a significant moment in the history of Israel. The rebellion, though it was over, had a lasting impact on David and the entire kingdom. The trust between David and some of his people had been severely damaged by Absalom's actions. While David was able to return to the throne, the unity of the kingdom had been fractured. The civil war had divided Israel, and it would take time to heal the wounds left by Absalom's rebellion. David's return to power did not mean the restoration of peace within the kingdom. The rebellion had created deep divisions, and many of the people who had supported Absalom now felt disconnected from David's leadership. Absalom had been a charismatic figure, and his rise to power had stirred a sense of hope for many in Israel. His sudden and violent death left a sense of loss and confusion among those who had once followed him. David's task of rebuilding trust and unity within Israel was now even more difficult than before. Although Absalom's rebellion ended in his death, the emotional toll on David was immeasurable. His loss was not just that of a son, but the result of the deep betrayal of his own flesh and blood. The father's love for his son was undiminished, even after all that had happened. This illustrates the complexity of human emotions, especially when it comes to family, love, and betrayal. David's grief over Absalom's death serves as a reminder that even in the midst of conflict and betrayal, the love between a parent and child remains profound. In the end, Absalom's rebellion and death had long-lasting consequences, not only for his family but also for the future of the kingdom. While David returned to the throne, the scars of the civil war remained. The story of Absalom serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, betrayal, and the fractured relationships that can result from seeking power at all costs. It also highlights the unshakable love a parent has for their child, even in the face of betrayal and tragedy. Absalom's story is a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and pride. His desire for power, combined with his belief that he deserved the throne, led him to betray his father, King David. Absalom's actions were driven by his own sense of entitlement, and he was willing to do whatever it took to achieve his goals, even if it meant dividing the kingdom and hurting those closest to him. In the end, his ambition cost him his life and everything he had worked for. His story serves as a warning about the destructive nature of seeking power for personal gain, especially when it results in betrayal and division. Absalom's prideful desire for power shows how ambition, when left unchecked, can blind us to the consequences of our actions. He didn't stop to consider the long-term effects of betraying his father and the harm his rebellion would cause to the nation. His ambition was fueled by a desire for recognition and control, but it ultimately led to his downfall. Absalom's life teaches us that seeking power without humility and respect can destroy relationships, damage communities, and lead to personal ruin. Another important lesson from Absalom's story is the critical role of loyalty and trust in relationships, especially within families. Absalom's betrayal of his father shattered the trust between them, and it was this betrayal that ultimately led to the tragic end of his rebellion. Trust is the foundation of all healthy relationships, and when it is broken, the damage can be irreparable. Absalom's actions serve as a reminder that loyalty to our family members, friends, and leaders is crucial for maintaining peace and unity. Without trust, relationships become fragile and vulnerable to conflict. In family relationships, especially between a father and son, loyalty is essential. Absalom's desire to seize the throne created a deep rift between him and King David, a rift that could not be healed. David's love for his son never wavered, but Absalom's ambition blinded him to the importance of loyalty and respect. This shows us how dangerous it is to let ambition or pride interfere with our commitment to those we love. Betraying a family member for personal gain can lead to heartbreak and destruction, just as it did for Absalom and David. Absalom's betrayal also highlights the importance of building relationships on respect, not on selfish desires. While Absalom may have felt justified in his actions, his rebellion was based on his belief that he could do a better job than his father. This lack of respect for David's authority, combined with his ambition, led him to betray his family and his people. We can learn from Absalom's mistakes by striving to build relationships on mutual respect, love, and trust, rather than letting personal desires cloud our judgment. Absalom's story teaches us valuable lessons about the dangers of pride, unchecked ambition, and the importance of loyalty and trust. We must be mindful of our motivations and strive to build strong, honest relationships with those we love. Absalom's tragic end reminds us that the pursuit of power at the expense of others can lead to destruction and loss, while loyalty, respect, and trust are the true foundations of lasting relationships. Absalom's life was filled with great promise, but ultimately marked by betrayal, pride, and tragedy. As the son of King David, he had a bright future ahead of him. However, his desire for power led him to rebel against his father, resulting in a civil war that divided the kingdom. Absalom's ambition to take the throne ultimately led to his untimely death. His story is a cautionary tale, reminding us of the importance of humility, loyalty, and the dangers of seeking power at all costs. Absalom's rebellion against his father teaches us valuable lessons about the destructive nature of pride and ambition. His actions were driven by a sense of entitlement, and he was willing to betray his father and his kingdom to achieve his goals. But in the end, he lost everything: his life, his kingdom, and his family's trust. Absalom's story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of maintaining humility and loyalty in our relationships, especially with those we love. As we reflect on Absalom's story, we must ask ourselves how we can avoid making the same mistakes. Are we allowing ambition to cloud our judgment and damage our relationships? Are we prioritizing personal gain over the well-being of others? Absalom's story challenges us to examine our motivations and consider the consequences of our actions. By prioritizing loyalty, humility, and integrity, we can avoid the pitfalls that led to Absalom's downfall. In our own lives, it is important to remember the value of humility. When we seek power or recognition at the expense of others, we risk alienating those closest to us and causing irreparable damage to our relationships. Like Absalom, we may be tempted to act out of pride and desire for control, but we must resist this urge and instead choose the path of humility, respect, and integrity. Only by doing so can we build lasting and meaningful relationships. Absalom's tragic end also reminds us that betrayal, especially within families, can have long-lasting and painful consequences. The trust between Absalom and his father, David, was shattered, and it was never fully repaired. Let this be a reminder that loyalty is key to maintaining strong relationships. Betraying those we love for personal gain can lead to heartbreak and division, just as it did for David and Absalom. As we conclude, let us reflect on the lessons from Absalom's story and strive to be people who value humility, loyalty, and integrity in our relationships. Let's ensure that our ambitions are aligned with the well-being of others and that we prioritize love and trust over power and control. Only by doing so can we avoid the tragic consequences that befell Absalom and ensure that our relationships remain strong and united. What lessons do you think we can learn from Absalom's story? How can you apply them in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos on powerful Bible stories.